Right, inshallah, we can begin. Please recite salawat. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Last week we began with some introductory notes, and then we began the first lesson. Today, inshallah, we will continue that. I wanted to add a few notes that should have probably been mentioned last week, but that I forgot to do so. The first important note is that when we were discussing how to write Arabic and some of the rules of writing, it's important to remember that the writing of the Quran, in any of the Qurans that you will find published in the Islamic world, is not according to the rules of the Arabic language. The Quran was written according to the ancient standard. Sometimes the same word in the Quran is written in different ways, in different places in the Quran. So whenever you see within the text of the Quran or a quotation from the Quran, you might see that there is a slight difference between the rules that we talk about or the way that standard Arabic is written now and the way that those words are written in the Quran. So I'm sure you're all familiar, for example, the word Rahman in the Quran is written like that. Right? In Arabic, that is still practiced today and it is correct, but it is also correct to write Rahman like that. Right? Many other words are written in the Quran similarly. So for example, the Prophet Sulaiman is written in the Quran like that. Of course, in modern Arabic, that will always be written with the alif. So there are many examples like that. The writing of the Quran is not standard. Generally, when the Quran is quoted, if you are quoting a verse of Quran and writing it yourself, it is best to follow the way that it is written in books and in the actual Quran, even if it doesn't conform to the standards that we have now. But sometimes you will see that it's not done. So many of our websites, for example, that have searchable Qur'ans online, tanzil.info, for example, tanzil.net. That's a very good resource, but because they want to make the Qur'an searchable, they've standardized the writing. And that's fine as well, but either way is acceptable. Any questions about that? That can be confusing sometimes, but if you know that the writing of the Qur'an is not standard, then you won't be confused. The reason for that, of course, is that the Quran was written at a time when these rules of Arabic had not yet been standardized. So for example, we have dots now to distinguish certain letters. We have what are known as harakat, the vowel signs, shadda, hamza. Many of those things had not yet been standardized because people would read the Quran who already were familiar with the language and were familiar with the Quran. They would use the writing just as kind of a shorthand to jog their memory. They already knew what they were reading, so it would not be a problem for them. But later on, when the language spread, many new people were learning the language who had not memorized the Quran, were not familiar with the Quran, or didn't even know Arabic. Then the need for a standardized writing system became more prominent, and then the writing was standardized. But the Quran continued to be written the way that it had always been written. So that was one point that I wanted to add from the introduction to the Arabic script. Now we will continue what we were talking about last week, inshallah. We had discussed the beginning of lesson 1, which is the different types of Arabic letters, al-huruf al-shamsiyya, al-huruf al-qamariyya. And if you come now to page 3 in the notes, if any of you do not have the notes, then they are available on our Yahoo group. You can download them and print a copy right now, hoping that everybody will be able to at least follow along with somebody, a neighbor, if you don't have a copy for yourself. One of the things that distinguishes Arabic from English and many other languages is that Arabic has case. This is known in Arabic as i'rab. I'rab. And case basically means that words in Arabic will change how they look depending on what their function is in a sentence. That doesn't really exist in English, except in a few words. Right? And so I'll use one of the only examples that we have in English, but in English it's an exception to the rule. In Arabic, this is a rule that applies to all words. So in English we have two words, me and I. Right? Me and I. What is the difference between those two words? Do they refer to a different thing? Right? Both of them are pronouns, and they both refer to the same thing. Right? The person who is speaking. First person singular pronoun. They both refer to the same object. What is the difference between the two? Right? If you know English well, you know that me is used in certain places where I is not used. And I is used in certain places where me is not used, based on the function in the sentence. Right? So we can say, for example, he hit me. Right? That is the standard Arabic example that has been used in grammar textbooks from the earliest days. So if you have an objection to the violence of it, I apologize for it. It's just a standard, and we'll go with convention. Right? So he hit me, or I hit him. These are the same word, or refer to the same person. But in the first sentence, we use me because I am receiving an action. An action is being done to me. The function of the word me in this sentence is that something is done to me. So I will never say he hit I. In this sentence, the purpose of the word is to express who is doing an action, not the person to whom an action is done. Right? In the first sentence, me is an object, a direct object. In the second sentence, I is the subject. It is doing and not being done to. And that is the only difference. And because we have that difference, it allows us some flexibility in the word order in the sentence. Right? Because the word will tell us whether it is doing or something is being done to it. So we have some flexibility. But in English, there's not a great deal of flexibility. So I can say, me, he, hit. Right? It's not normally how we talk, but it's a correct sentence in English. Who is doing the hitting? He. Even though me comes first, he refers to the one doing it. And who is being hit? The me. Right? This is the object. Even though it comes first, but because it is me and not I, we know that something is being done. Right? Of course, normally we would say, he hit me. That is the normal order that we have in English. But there's not a whole lot that you can change the order, because most words in English, they don't change their form. So let's take another sentence. And this is not, I'm not confused. This is not a lesson of English grammar. But in order to understand case, for those of you who have not studied a language before that has case, it's important to understand the concept. Then we can apply it in Arabic. So bear with me if you already have studied a language that has case, or you've already studied Arabic and you understand the concept. Right, let's say that I want to say, Zayd gave Bakr a book. In this sentence, who is the subject? Who is doing the action? Zayd. Now, what is the action being done to? It's being done to a book. A book is being given. And then Bakr is what's known as an indirect object. Bakr is not being given. Something is being given to Bakr. So we have 3 nouns. Each of them has a different function. Right? I could also say this like this. Zayd gave a book to Bakr. That would be the best way to say it. Zayd is doing something. He's doing something to a book, the direct object. And then indirectly, that book is being conveyed to Bakr. So he is the indirect object, or it is the indirect object. It's the order that tells us who is being given the book and who is giving the book. Right? So if I said Zayd gave Bakr a book, if I had changed the order and I had said Bakr gave Zayd a book, the meaning would change. But imagine if in English we had a marker to tell us whether somebody is doing something or something is being done to it. Let's say that the subject, if we put a un, and the object, we put an an. In this case, the indirect object. If we had done that, Zaydun gave Bakran a book. In this case, it's the indirect object, so it doesn't correspond to the Arabic, but it's not a problem. If we had done that in English, we could even change the order. We could have said, Bakran gave Zaydun a book. And even though Zaydun is coming second now, and Bakran is coming first, it would still mean that Zayd is giving the book because he has the marker, that marker, that refers to the person doing the action. And Bakran still has that marker that refers to the person to whom something is being done. So the difference is that with case, word order is not so important. There's a marker on the word that tells you whether that word is doing something or something is being done to the word, or if the word has a completely different function. Those aren't the only 2 functions it can have in a sentence. There might be many other functions. But there's a sign that tells you what the function of the word is in a sentence. And just so we don't forget that we are in an Arabic class, let me translate not this example exactly, but a similar example in Arabic. Daraba Zaydun Amran. Zayd hit Amr. I could also say Amran Daraba Zaydun, and it would have the same meaning. Because Zaydun has that marker wherever he is in the sentence, wherever the word Zayd is in a sentence, he's doing something. Amran has that marker, whether it's in the beginning of the sentence or the middle of the sentence or the end of the sentence, something is being done to Amr. But if I change that and I say Amrun, there's an extra waw that's written on Amrun, so you don't confuse it with the word Umar. It's just to make it clear in writing. Amrun daraba Zaidan. Or daraba Zaidan Amrun. In this case, the verb comes first, Zaidan Amrun. Who's being hit? Who's being hit? Zaid. The one with the unmarker is the object. It's coming first, but it has the marker that tells you it's not doing anything. Something is being done to it. And who is doing the hitting? Amrun. Whether it comes first, whether it comes in the beginning, you look at the marker. And that's what makes it important. And that's why some of you may have been told when you were children that if you speak carelessly in your own language, be very careful when you recite Arabic or you read the Quran, because changing an un to an an is very dangerous. Right? The classical example of that is the Quranic verse. Right, and when I write the verses of the Quran on the projector, I'm going to write it according to the standard rules of Arabic writing. Right? In the Quran itself, the word ulama, for example, is written like this. Right? But that's not what we will be using for the purposes of this class. So this sentence, innama, that just means only. Yakhsha, anybody know what yakhsha means? To be fear, to have fear. Yeah. So, fear. Min ibadihi, this is kind of, parenthetical. Apologize for the messiness of that. Min ibadihi, from his servants. Right? The basic sentence is Yakhsha Allah al-ulama. Right? The innama is an extra word. The min ibadihi is parenthetical. The basic constituents of the sentence are Yakhsha Allah al-ulama. Now, if you translate that literally, it means fears God, the ulama. God fears the ulama. Right? But however much power the ulama might have, God does not fear them. So we will never read it, Yakhshallahu al-ulama'a. Right? That would mean God is doing the fearing and the ulama are being feared. You can read it that way, but instead of getting the reward for reciting the Quran, it will be a sin. Instead, the correct recitation is Yakhshallaha al-ulama'u. Or in the original verse, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءُ. They only fear God among His servants. Who? The ulama. Only the ulama fear God among His servants. So do you see how it's not the order that tells us whether God is fearing or being feared, whether the ulama are fearing or being feared, but what is it that tells us? The sign. Of course, what's beautiful about Arabic is that, as I mentioned last week, we're never going to write the signs. So you always have to have your mind engaged, on, working. If you need caffeine, whatever you need, You have to know what you're reading, otherwise you can't just read straight through. Because then you will read يَخْشَى اللَّهُ الْعُلَمَاءَ. And there are actually people who have read the Quran that way. It's a qira'at which has been reported in history, of course. It is absolutely incorrect and in no way a proper recitation of the Quran. Question?
So, if the verse said like إِنَّمَا مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءُ يَخْشَوْنَ, is there any subtle change or is it just stylistic?
No, there is a change. There is a change in meaning, but it's a change in style and in emphasis. So, if I say Zaydan daraba Amr, I'm saying Amr hit Zayd with emphasis. It's Zayd that Amr hit, as opposed to saying simply Zayd hit Amr. So there is a difference, but it's a difference in style and emphasis and eloquence. It's not a difference in meaning. Right? So English is called an analytical language because it's the place order that tells you what the function of a word is, the order in a sentence, usually. But Arabic is a language that you have case. Now, in general, most of the time, there will be a standard order in Arabic as well. But you have to know the case in order to understand what exactly a sentence means. And in language that is eloquent, that is poetic, sometimes the word order is shifted because you want to emphasize something more or emphasize something less, or you want to achieve a certain effect. And so then the order might not be as you would expect. And Allah could have said that يَخْشَى الْعُلَمَاءُ Allah. But He changed the order because He wanted to emphasize fear of God. So in the Quran, for example, in du'as, in poetry, it's important to know this concept of case. So is the idea of case understood? The function of a word in a sentence. And that's known in Arabic as i'rab. In Arabic, there are many different functions that a word can have. It can be the subject of a sentence, the direct object of a sentence, the indirect object of a sentence. It can be the possessor of something, the thing that is possessed by something else. It can be when an action was done, how an action was done, why an action was done. It can explain an ambiguity in another word. It can be an exception to something that has been mentioned in a previous sentence. It can be something that is negated, that is not the case, something that is no longer the case, something that might happen, something that should happen, something that you want to happen, it must happen. All of these are different functions. But thankfully, there aren't 50 different cases in Arabic. Right? If there were to be a different sign for every single one of those different functions, then there would have to be a large number of cases. There would have to be one case for he goes, one case for he does not go, one case for he should go, one case for he might go. Right? Because all of those are different functions. There's a different meaning in that sentence. But in Arabic, for nouns, there are only 3 cases. Marfu', mansub, and this is in your notes. It's a meme. Majroor. A noun will either be marfu', mansub, or majroor. Different functions will fall into these categories. So there's several different functions that will be marfu'. There are several different functions that will be mansub. there are several different functions that will be majroor. And we'll talk about all of those. For verbs, verbs can also have different functions, right? They have also 3 cases, but they're a little bit different. We'll talk about that later. But basically, these are the 3 types of i'rab that you can have for a noun. These are the 3 different functions that a noun can have, or the 3 different categories of functions, different types of functions that a noun can have in a sentence. And there's different examples for each. There is not just one standard sign for each of these cases. So I can't say that the sign for marfu will always be un, and the sign for mansub will always be an, and the sign for majroor will always be in. Right? That's not the case. There's different signs for different types of words. But usually, the sign for marfu will be a dhamma, the u sound, with or without tanween. The sign for mansub will be a fatha, that's a fa. A fatha, with or without the tanween. And the sign for majroor will be a kasra, with or without the tanween. So the sign for marfu will be u or un. For mansub will be a or an. For majroor will be I or in, but not always. Is that clear? We can look at the examples that we have in the notes. We can say, for example, this is on page 3, Daraba Zaydun. Zayd hit. Zaydun is what in that sentence? The subject. This time he's hitting, he's not getting hit. And so you see a dhamma on the last letter. The case will always show up at the end of a word, on the last letter, or after the last letter. And in this case, Zayd has tanween. Tanween is the noon sound at the end. If we add a word to that sentence, so who did Zayd hit? We can say, Daraba Zaydun Amran. Amran is the, what of the sentence? Direct object. Object. Amr is the object, Zayd is still the sentence. This is still the subject. Zayd is still doing the hitting, did it, and Amr received it. So we say Amran, he was hit. And majroor is, for example, Alhamdulillah. Do we say Alhamdulillahu? Alhamdulillaha? Or the third option, Alhamdulillah, he. Why do we say lillahi? Because of the la. Praise is for God. Because there's that word for, li. Allah has jar, majroor. It's majroor and it has a kasra. Allah does not take tanween. So we will not say alhamdulillahin. We'll say alhamdulillahi. Many of you may have noticed that sometimes we will have Allahu, like in Allahu Akbar. We will have Allah, like the last sentence that we just read. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءُ. Sometimes we will have Lillahi, for example. It's because Allah is fulfilling a different role in the sentence. Sometimes people ask, is it proper to say Muhammadun Rasulullah or Muhammadan Rasulullah? Well, it depends what the sentence is. If you're just saying Muhammadun Rasulullah, it's Muhammadun. But if it's a different sentence, like Inna Muhammadan Rasulullah or Ashhadu Anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, then it might be Muhammadan. In certain sentences, the word might be Muhammadin if it's fulfilling a different role. So, a noun can be either marfu' or mansub or majroor. If you look at the chart at the bottom of page 3, I've given a few different examples for i'rab. I think we have some new people, so I will write this chart on the board as well. If you already have it in front of you, please take a look at the chart that is on the bottom of page 3. So these are 3 different examples of how the i'rab might be shown. Zayd, when it is marfu', will be Zaydun. When it is mansub, it will be Zaydan. When it is majroor, it will be Zaydin. Same word, it's just doing a different thing in different sentences, and it will have a different form. But if we take the plural of the word Muslim, it's Muslimun, Muslimuna, or Muslimina. The difference is in what letter comes after the word Muslim. It will either be a waw or a ya. Muslimuna if it's marfu', Muslimina if it's mansub or majroor. In these 2 cases, it's the same ending. And there are some words like that. The ending will be shared between 2 different cases. That's okay, because even marfu' itself can have many different functions. Mansub itself is many different functions that a word can have. Majroor itself is many different functions. So sometimes they have the same ending, the same symbol. Pronounce the same. Muslimina in both cases. No, there'll be Muslimina in both cases. Same pronunciation, exact same writing, same vowels if you were to put the vowel signs on it. But you won't say the i'rab is the same. The i'rab is either mansub or majroor. The sign of the i'rab is the same. So don't confuse i'rab with that u, a, e, or the letter that's there. I'rab is whether it's marfu or whether it's mansub or whether it's majroor. That's the case, what category it's in. Then the question is, all right, it's in the mansub case. How does it show the mansub case? In the case of Zayd, it will be with a fatha and a tanween. In the case of some words, it will be with a ya. And the previous letter will have a kasra, Muslimina. And in this third example, it's waw for a marfu, alif for mansub, ya for majroor. Abul Fadl, Abal Fadl, Abil Fadl. That is the title or the appellation of the brother of Imam Hussein, and also the uncle of the Prophet, who had the same name, Abbas. Right? So you can say Abul Fadl, Abal Fadl, or Abil Fadl, depending on the function of the sentence. So here we have 3 different signs. A kasra, a ya, and a ya. In the case of masculine plural noun, the ya is for both majroor and for mansoob. But in the case of this word, the word itself is ab. And ab means father. Right? If it's marfu, in certain cases it will become abu. In certain cases it will become aba. In certain cases it will become abi. In this case, the ya is only for majroor. For the mansoob, there's an alif. But for Muslimin, that's not the case. The ya is doing double duty.
How we differentiate in a sentence?
How do you differentiate? Usually it will become clear. The context will tell you, the meaning will become clear. This is not one of the hard cases. We're going to come to some of the hard cases later. Arabic is a language that likes to get you in by saying that there's a rule and it's easy, and then there's one exception and another exception, and a slightly more difficult case and a slightly more difficult case, until you don't know what's going on. But eventually it will all become clear, inshallah. So can I have somebody just tell us what's the difference between i'rab and haraka? Anybody know the difference? Sure.
I'rab will always be on the last letter, or it will always come at the end. Haraka will be on all the letters.
I'rab will always be on the last letter or at the end of a word, because that's telling you the function of that word, what category it is. Right? I'rab, again, remember, is marfu, mansoob, majroor. Right? Haraka tells you simply what vowel it has, or if it has none, if it's sakin. Fatha, dhamma, kasra. Sometimes a haraka will represent an i'rab. Like the dhamma in zaydun represents the i'rab of marfu, but not always. Like the word zayd, right? It has one haraka on the za. That fatha, this is a haraka. It has nothing to do with i'rab, as the sister mentioned. The ya lacks a haraka. It has a sukoon. The dal, it has a haraka. That haraka represents i'rab. So some harakat will represent i'rab. Some harakat, like this, will not represent i'rab. Sometimes i'rab will be shown by a haraka. Sometimes i'rab will be shown without a haraka. Like in Muslimin, the i'rab is shown by the letter ya. So there are two different things. Moving on. In Arabic, there are certain kinds of words that do not show their i'rab. The i'rab is hidden. Right? There are certain words which are known as mabni. Actually, don't write that. Let me make the chart properly. Al-kalima, a word, kalima means word in Arabic. A word will be either mu'rab or mabni. Some words are mabni, they don't change. Mabni means fixed. From the word bina, to make. It's made, it's fixed. And it's like furniture that you buy from IKEA. Once it's assembled, it cannot be changed or it's going to break. So there's certain words in Arabic that cannot be changed. They will always remain in their form. They're not flexible. Mu'rab are those words that can change. They're flexible. If you're careful, you'll notice that this word mu'rab, it kind of sounds a little bit like i'rab. The i'rab shows. Mabni are words, they still have an i'rab, because they still have a function in the sentence. But you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at them. Right? Now, none of you gamble, so you don't know what a poker face is, but if you did, then you could say that mabni words, they have a poker face. They have a function in the sentence, but I don't know what that means either. But they don't show it. Most of the words that you will see in Arabic, they are mu'rab. But the Arabs did not want to make it easy for you. They said that if most of the words are mu'rab, we have to make two types of mu'rab words to give you a little bit of difficulty. So then mu'rab words are either going to be munsarif, my handwriting is going to get progressively worse, and ghair munsarif, that is a sad. I will rewrite it. Munsarif and ghair munsarif. Munsarif is known in your book as a triptote. It shows all three types of i'rab with a different sign. There's a different sign for marfu', a different sign for mansoob, a different sign for majroor. To be more precise, it is a word that can accept a kasra or a tanween. Ghair munsarif is a word that can never take a tanween, can never take a kasra. And because it will not take a kasra, the sign for jar, for majroor, will not be a kasra. So the closest thing to a kasra is a fatha. Right? Dhamma is reserved for marfu', and then the fatha will do double duty for mansoob and majroor. So munsarif are the ones you like. You can take a dhamma, fatha, kasra. You can take tanween. Ghair munsarif, it's still mu'rab. It still shows the i'rab, but it will not take a kasra or a tanween. Except when it does, and we'll talk about that later. And mabni are words that don't change at all. They have a set form.
And they have a set, they only take like say dhamma or kasra or fatha.
Yeah, they might have a dhamma or a kasra or a fatha,
Okay.
but it's always going to be that. So like for example, the word al-ana. That's always going to be al-ana. It means now. Even if I say min al-ana, normally min puts a word in the majroor case. But you don't say min al-ani, because this fatha is not a fatha of i'rab. Al-an is always going to be al-ana. Doesn't want to tell you what its function in the sentence is by changing.
That's still majroor, but
It is majroor, but it's not going to change.
and those you just have to memorize also?
You have to memorize them. There's certain words, and you'll be able to recognize them. They're usually they're words that are not normal nouns. Right? Let's actually go through that and give a few examples. So let's say, for example, we have the word min ba'id. Ba'id means what? Far. And what will the i'rab be? Min ba'idin. Right? From far. Anybody completely lost and brave enough to admit it? Who? I heard a me. All right. Review it when we're done, and then it should start to fall in place. If you're seeing this all for the first time, it takes a little while to sink in, so don't worry about it too much. The word is ba'id in Arabic. Min, from far, that puts the word after it in the majroor case. So you have to put a kasra. It's from far away. Right? It's telling us the origin of something. That's the function of the sentence. It's telling us from where. So it has this case. But if I want to say from here, I will say min huna. I will not say min hunin or min huna'in or anything like that. That word huna does not change. It's mabni. Surely I can cancel that. If I want to give an example of غير منصرف, I don't have room on the first row, so I'll write it below. I can say min Makkah. Makkah is غير منصرف. What does that mean? No tanween, no kasra. So unlike ba'idin, I won't say min makkatin because it can't take tanween or kasra, so I'm going to say min makkata. Min makkata. All three of these words are in the same case. They're all majroor. They're all fulfilling the same function. They're telling us where something is coming from. So they're majroor. Ba'idin is the word that we like. It's a mu'rab word. It tells you kasra and majroor. Makkah is a little stubborn. If it had been marfu, it would have been makkatu. Because it's majroor, it's makkata. It changes a little bit. It's غير منصرف. Huna does not change at all. It's going to be huna, no matter what its function in the sentence is. Even if min comes before it. It's always going to be huna. Here. It means here. I'm not going to ask any questions because I'm sure there are questions and I want to move on. But after class, if you do have questions, then you'll be free to ask. So, a word will be either mu'rab or mabni. Mabni does not change. Mu'rab does change. And it will either be fully changeable, munsarif, triptote, or partially changeable, غير munsarif. Right? Don't get confused by that غير. It still does change, just not as much. Right? There's a few examples that we have of words that are mu'rab and that are munsarif. Most nouns in Arabic are like this. The word bab, that dot belongs there, means door or gate. If it's marfu, what will I say? Babun. Right? If the door is doing something, I will say babun. If it is in mansub case, what will I say? Baban. And I'll add an alif. The alif is written just because there should be some difference in writing. Baban. Right? If something is being done to the door, like fataha baban, he opened a door. Something is being done to the door. It was opened. And if it's majroor, I gave it away. Babin. I meant to ask that. Right? All three are different.
Give that an example.
دخلت من باب. I entered from a door. That's actually going to be one of the sentences in our exercises today. But I lack creativity to think of a new example. So Bab is an example. Nuh, name of a prophet, Nuhun, Nuhan, Nuhin, right? Munsarif. 3 different forms. And the reason why we needed a second example, Nuh, is because there are only a few prophets' names that are munsarif. Majority of the prophets, because the names are not actually Arabic names, they're ghair munsarif. They change, but not a whole lot. And if you look at some of the examples, this is not all of them, but we gave some examples of nouns that tend to be ghair munsarif. And they are as follows. Feminine names. Fatima. We say Fatimatu. We don't say Fatimatun. It says Fatimatun?
Unless I'm reading it wrong.
No, it's not a tanween unless you printed it out before the final version was sent out. But it should be Fatimatu. It should be Fatimatu. Zainabu. Narjisu. Right? Most feminine names. Not all. Right? There has to be an exception to the rule just to keep it interesting. But most feminine names will be ghair munsarif. So it will be Fatimatu. In certain cases it can be Fatimata, but it will never be Fatimate or Fatimatun, Fatimatan, Fatimatin, never.
What if it's like an adjective from like Tayyibah?
Only if it's a name will this rule apply. If the same word is used in different context, then it does not have this rule. So if, for example, there is a name that sometimes is not a name, like Tahira, Tayyiba, Alima, right, then if it becomes a name, this will apply. If it's not a name, if it's used in another context in a sentence, then it's a different word.
Oh, so if you're using it as a name, then it would apply.
If it's used as a name, it applies. A feminine name will be ghair munsarif. The names of most places in Arabic are generally considered feminine. So Makkatu, Lubnanu, Karbala'u. There are some exceptions, like Al-Iraq is masculine, and Najaf is masculine, and a few other examples. Question?
I'm not understanding how you know if a name is ghair munsarif or just.
How it's ghair munsarif? If it's the name, if it's a feminine name, if it's a name for a female, like Fatima or Zainab or Narjis, or Tahira, if it's a name, Maryam, then it will be ghair munsarif. Right? Our book actually has a neat little shorthand for words that it gives you. If it is munsarif, then, so for example, the word salih, when it gives you the English, let me clear that first. In our book, the word salih, right, it tells you how to pronounce it. It writes it like this, salih, and then it gives you a little hyphen. That hyphen means there will be an ending. And the ending will be mu'rab and it will be munsarif. It can be one of those 3 forms. Right? It's fully flexible. But in other cases, it will tell you that it's not that way. So for example, when it tells you how to pronounce this word, that is about. No. It tells you it's pronounced like this. Jibrilu. The reason why it puts an u here is to signal to you that it's غير منصرف. It will either be u or sometimes it will be a, Jibrila. But it's only one of those two. So in the book, whenever there's a new word, you see a new noun, it will either end in a hyphen, and it'll tell you it's munsarif, or it will end in an u, which tells you it's غير munsarif. That u can change to an a, depending on the function. The other three common examples that we have in our notes, and there will be others that we will talk about, are words that are on the pattern af'al, akbar, a'zam, ahsan, a'lam. Any word that looks like this, akbar, or that's on that pattern, it will be akbaru or akbara. That's why we say Allahu akbaru. We don't say Allahu akbarun, because akbar cannot take a tanween. Words that are not Arabic in their origin, like Ibrahim, Ismail, Dawood, Ishaq, Yaqub, Zakaria, Isa, Musa, Adam.
So Nu is Arabic? Or is that...
There's exceptions. There are exceptions. Nuh, Lut, Hud are exceptions. And the feminine name Hind. Salih is an Arabic word. So there are some prophets whose names are Arabic. Muhammad is an Arabic word and it's munsarif. So we say Muhammadun Rasulullah. It's munsarif. We already defined what غير munsarif means. No tanween, no kasra. You can take a look at the examples that are in the notes later. One other note is that there are other particular rules that do apply. We will see that when we get to them. But one example is feminine plural nouns. What is the plural of the word muslima? Muslimat. There are some examples that I will give in class that might not always be politically correct. It is not to be prejudiced or to be unfair, but sometimes a colorful example is the best way to remember something. So please take it in the spirit of humor and not in the spirit of actually being serious, because that is often how we remember things best, if it's unique. So, feminine plural nouns, right, with that prior disclosure. No, they're not غير منصرف. Women take revenge sometimes, some people say. So this is, feminine plural is the revenge for غير منصرف. It's the revenge of the kasra. غير منصرف will have a dhamma or a fatha, but never a kasra. So feminine plural takes the revenge on behalf of the kasra. You can look at it positively, that women take the side of the oppressed kasra, and so they go all out for the kasra. You can have a dhamma you can have a kasra, sorry, but you will never have a fatha. You will never have muslimata or muslimatan. Never. So if I want to say God created the earth, how will I say that? What is created? The word created in Arabic? خلق. The verb comes first in Arabic. God, Allahu, al-arda, al-ard, the earth. خلق الله الأرض. Because the earth was created, right? If I had said al-ardo and Allah, I would no longer be a Muslim, right? Because then it would mean created, the earth, God, right? Because it's not the order, but it's the ending that tells us what is going on. So we won't say خَلَقَ اللَّهَ because God is not created, God does the creating. خَلَقَ اللَّهُ, God did the creating. Al-arda was created. Al-ard is in what case? Mansub, because it was receiving the action. Right? Something happened to the earth. What happened to it? It was created. But what if I want to say God created the heavens? خَلَقَ اللَّهُ السماوات not السماوات. Same function, it's still mansub. It's still the direct object. Just as the earth was created, the heavens were created. But we will say خَلَقَ اللَّهُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ. Now, al-ard and as-samawat, they have the same function. Both of them are direct objects. Something was done to them, but a different ending. Because I take back the example of vindictiveness and sympathy. The feminine plural is sympathetic to the poor kasra that was oppressed. Al-ard is just a regular mu'arab noun, it takes a fatha. Ard and samawat both change. So they're mu'arab. They're both mu'arab, but in one case it can take a fatha, in one case it cannot take a fatha. And the rest of the lesson, if you wish, you can just skim over it. It tells you some of the examples of what types of nouns are marfu', what types of nouns are majroor, and what types of nouns are mansub. But since we're going to be spending the rest of the year talking about this and other things, we'll move on right now. There was a suggestion given to us last week, and it's a good suggestion that we give you a general lesson plan of what we're going to cover, inshallah, for this first semester. And inshallah, I have that ready. I wanted to see exactly how much we're going to cover in this class to see what our pace is. And then inshallah, I will send that to you in my next email. Yes?
Are we going to have a test?
I covered that last week. We will have tests, but it's not going to be something that you have to worry about. It'll probably be take-home tests. All right, so we can look at lesson 2. Does everybody have a copy of this? We had some extra copies. Raise your hand if you do not have access to a copy. Brother Sakib, can you see if we still have extras? Right. Anybody else not have a copy? Nouns in Arabic, they have gender. Every noun will be either masculine or feminine. Now, in some cases, it's obvious. Like the word ab, it means father. Now, I wouldn't need to give you a long time to guess that that word is masculine. Arabs were humorous when they made their language, but not that humorous. They wouldn't play with masculine and feminine like that. The word meaning mother, is feminine. The word akh, meaning brother, is, somebody's brave, is masculine, yes. The word ukht, meaning sister, is feminine. Right? Women are braver than the men, yes. Right? So these words are obvious. Right? You don't need a sign, you just need to know what the word means. But then there are some words that there's no obvious choice, like the word park. Should it be masculine or feminine? Masculine. You don't need to philosophize about it and say, well, parks, women enjoy them more than men, or you don't need to philosophize about it. There's no standard, there's no rule. You just have to know how the word is used. In fact, the word park could be bustan, in which case it will be masculine, or it could be hadiqa, in which case it would be feminine, or it could be jannah. It's not really a park, but garden, orchard, right? Similar words.
Could be any of those?
Yes. There's not really the word park. Park would be probably more hadiqa, but an orchard, a flower garden. You could use the word bustan at least, if not hadiqa, if not jannah so much. So it can be masculine or feminine. Depending on the function in the sentence. So some words, they won't be obvious. We have certain general rules. If the word belongs to a female, human or animal, then it will be feminine in general. If it is the name of a place, it will be feminine. So Mecca, Baghdad, Pakistan, they're all feminine. Right? Except Iraq and a few other examples. That should be Al-Iraq, by the way. In number 2, you can add an alif lam, Al-Iraq. Parts of the body that are in pairs. Right? So we have a few doctors in class, for those of you or aspiring doctors. If you're not good in anatomy, you can consult with the doctors. If you have 2 of an organ, it will probably be feminine. If you have 1 of an organ, it will be masculine. So nose will be masculine. Eye will be feminine. Don't tell me I have 4 eyes. It's 2, right? There's no sign. Ayn does not have a feminine sign, any kind of marker. Doesn't look very different from anf. Ayn, anf. But how do I know this is feminine? Because a normal person will have 2 eyes, and a normal person will have 1 nose. Most nouns that end in the ta marbuta will be feminine. But not always. Muawiyah is a masculine name. Talha, same way. Even though they end in ta. Or Allama. Allama, meaning a very learned person, right? A very learned man, somehow similar to a woman, and so there's a ta there. Right? We say Allama. That's not actually why they added the ta. But it's a masculine adjective, even though it has a ta. It could apply to a female as well. But when are you ever going to find a woman that way? The word Allam is also used, right? And so for Allah, Allamul Ghuyub, very learned, right? Allama is not the feminine form of Allam. Allama is, the ta is added to describe somebody who knows a great deal, right? And it's generally used for men. I believe grammatically it could be used for women as well, right? But there are other examples of that. So, for example, the word rawiya. Rawiya is a person who narrates poetry. Right? You know the word rawin or ar-rawi? A person who narrates, say, the hadith of the Prophet, the sayings of the Prophet or the Imams. Ar-rawi is a narrator, and that can be feminine, ar-rawiya. But there's also a word rawiya, which means a person who narrates a whole lot of poetry. They do it so much that ta is added. This ta, when it's a narrator of poetry, is not because it's feminine, it's because it's the way the word is used. And it can be used, in this case, it is used for both men and women. So you can have a man who is rawiya, you can have a woman who is rawiya. So basically the point that you need to know, and we don't need to make it confusing, the ta marbuta generally means the noun is feminine. But sometimes there can be a ta and it can be masculine, or both masculine and feminine. Sometimes there can be no ta and it's still feminine. Moving on, collective nouns. Collective nouns that refer to a group are treated as feminine because they are nouns that refer to a jama'ah. A jama'ah is a group, and that noun is feminine. The word jama'ah, group, is feminine. So for example, the word room. Room not only refers to a place, but also to the people of Rome. Turk is not an adjective for one person, but it's a collective noun. The people, the Turkic people, at-Turk. And similarly, al-Arab, the Arab people, al-Arab, does not mean an Arab. The word Arab is used in English, but it does not come from Arabic. It probably comes from Persian, because in Persian, or in Urdu, they will say an Arab. But in Arabic, they will never say an Arab, they will say an Arabi. Huwa Arabi, or hiya Arabiya. That is the singular, Arabi. Al-Arab is a collective noun. It refers to the people, the Arab people.
Outside, like how people refer to them as Al-Arab?
Al-Arab, the Arabs. You don't need a plural marker. In English, we have to say the Arabs with an S because Arab itself is treated as singular. But that's not how it's used in Arabic. Similar to Turk or Rum, many other collective nouns. Names given to the wind. I will not give you a mnemonic aid for that because I wouldn't dare. But Samum, Rih, they're feminine nouns. Names given to fire. Again, I'm not going to give you a memory aid for that. Nar, Jahannam, they're feminine. It's Jahannam, not Jahannum. Proper pronunciation, Jahannam. And some feminine nouns, they have just to be learned. Wine, khamr, you can think of your own memory aid for that. The word nafs, right? The Quran says that Allah created humanity from min nafsin wahida. Right? That's not a feminist verse because the word nafs is feminine. Right? So it's not saying that it was a feminine soul that God created as opposed to a masculine soul. It's simply saying that God created humanity from one soul. The word nafs by itself is always feminine, whether it refers to a man's soul or to a woman's soul. It will be feminine. It's a feminine word. Right? Now, yes, Allah could have chosen a different word that was masculine, and He chose a feminine word, and maybe that is to give a message. That's something that tafsir will cover. But the word nafs itself is always feminine, whether it refers to a man or to a woman. Ard, sama, they're also feminine words. So now, if you know that some words are masculine, some words are feminine, we can talk about mawsuf and sifa. In Arabic, a mawsuf, a modified noun, and a sifa, an adjective, they're both nouns. Right? In English, we say that a word can be an adjective or it can be a noun. Right? But an adjective is not a noun. The word big, what is it? It's an adjective. It's not a noun. The word house is a noun. If I say big house, then big is an adjective, house is a noun. But in Arabic, they're both nouns. Kabir is a noun, Bayt is a noun. Bayt can be described by kabir. So I can say Baytun kabir. In that case, Bayt will be mawsuf because it is described. Kabir will be a sifa because it is describing. But they're both nouns. All nouns in Arabic can be used as mawsuf. So I can name somebody Kabir, for example, or I can use the word Kabir by itself. But words that are used as mawsuf will not always be able to be used as a sifa. Bayt will never be an adjective. Right? So in Arabic, both adjectives and mawsuf, both a sifa and a mawsuf, they are both going to be a noun. There are two types of nouns. And hold your question if you have a question, don't forget it. Adjectives in Arabic, they will agree with the noun. There will be an agreement between the two. Right? In English, I say big house, and I say big houses. But in Arabic, I will say big's houses. They will agree. If the modified noun is plural, this will be plural. If houses is feminine, this will be feminine. Or yes, if houses is feminine, this will be the adjective will be feminine. Same thing with case. Same thing with whether it's definite or indefinite. So there's four things. Let's use an example. Ar-rajul al-kabir, or ar-rajul al-kabiru, or min imra'atayn kabiratayn. Imra'a means woman. And that ending is for two. So min imra'atayn, from two women, kabiratayn, who are big. Two big women, or two great women. Ar-rajul al-kabir. The word ar-rajul is definite, the man. The adjective will also be definite, al. The word rajul is marfu, the word kabir will be marfu. Ar-rajulul kabiru. If it had been ar-rajulil, it would be kabire. If it had been ar-rajula, it would have been kabira. The word rajul is masculine, the word kabir is masculine. The word rajul is singular, therefore the word kabir will be singular. If we change all of those, imra'atayn is dual. So kabiratayn is dual. It has the ayn ending. It's in the majroor case, min imra'atayn, because of the min. So kabiratayn is in the majroor case. Imra'atun is feminine. Kabiratayn is also feminine. Imra'atayn, kabiratayn. It's a feminine adjective. So it's and imra'a is indefinite. Imra'atayn is indefinite, any two women. Kabiratayn is indefinite. If I wanted to make it definite, we drop the alif. Al-mar'atayn, I'd have to make this definite too. Al-kabiratayn. Right? That's just an example. We will talk about how those words are formed. But adjectives have to agree with the noun that they are talking about. Take a look at the bottom of page 1. We have some examples here. Kitabun mubinun. Kitab, book. It's a singular, masculine noun. Mubinun, the adjective, is also singular, masculine. Kitab has no alif lam, it's indefinite. Mubin has no alif lam, it's indefinite. Kitab has an on it. Mubin has an on it. They agree. They're both marfu. If I add fi, kitab becomes fi kitabin. Does mubin stay mubinun? No. Mubin also becomes mubinin. But they're both still singular. They're both still masculine. They're both indefinite. I apologize for the printing, but that should read amalun salihun. A good deed. If I want to say the good deed, I can't just change the amal. Amalun salihun to al-amalu. Because the adjective also has to change. If it's the good deed, it's not just al-amal, but it's as-salih. The adjective agrees with the noun that it describes. And then the verse of Quran. Yatlu suhufan. Suhuf is the plural of sahifa. Suhufan mutahharatan. Suhufan mutahharatan. Notice that suhufan is plural, so mutahharatan is feminine, but it's treated as a plural. Right? When I say it agrees, either it's going to become plural or it's going to be used in a form that's used for plural nouns. So mutahharatan is used for plural. Suhufan is mansub. He recites scrolls, object. So mutahharatan is also mansub. Suhufan is indefinite. Mutahharatan is indefinite. If I wanted to make it definite, I would say as-suhufa al-mutahharata. And suhuf is feminine. Mutahhara, the agreement when you have a noun in the plural is slightly different. We'll talk about that later. So the masculine feminine part of it, if it's a plural noun, the rules are a little bit different. But both will be indefinite, both will be mansub, and since the noun is plural, the adjective will also correspond to the plural. We can turn the page. Sometimes there is an adjective that describes something, but we use it a little different. If I say a big house or the house is big, the big house, the house is big. What's the difference? In both cases, big describes the house. But in one case, it's just one phrase, big house. In another case, it's a sentence. I'm saying the house is big. But in both cases, the house is being described by the adjective big. Right? But what changes is that when I make it into a sentence, the i'rab will not always agree. Because now it's not just an adjective describing a noun, it's part of a sentence. The house is big. So sometimes the function of that adjective, now that it's in the predicate of the sentence, it's in a different part of the sentence, might change. It might have the same i'rab, it might be different. And whether it's definite or indefinite will also change. Generally, the predicate of a sentence is indefinite. So for example, I will say, Ar-rajulu hakim. The man is wise. Right? If I had said, Ar-rajulu al-hakim, it could have been an adjective, the wise man. But because ar-rajul is definite, hakim is not definite, we know it's not just a noun and its adjective. That tells us that in this case, hakim is a predicate. We're saying the man is wise. It's a complete sentence. Ar-rajulu hakimun. That is why it's important to know that if it's an adjective, it will agree. If it doesn't agree, one is ma'rifah, one is nakira, one is definite, one is indefinite, then it's something else. It's not a noun and adjective. In this case, ar-rajulu hakimun. So I can say, ar-rajulu al-hakim, the wise man. That they agree. A noun, modified noun, an adjective describing it. The wise man.
Isn't the predicate mansub?
Not always. The predicate will have its own case depending on what its function is. So in this case, it will still be marfu. Ar-rajulu hakimun. But there's no alif lam, so this is not an adjective describing the noun right away, directly. It's a different part of the sentence. In Arabic, there is no word is, or am, or are. Right? That the way it's used in a sentence will tell us. We don't say ar-rajul is hakim. Well, we can say that, but then we wouldn't be speaking Arabic. Ar-rajulu hakimun. The man is wise. Sometimes we add something to the beginning of a sentence and it changes the case. So we can say inna, verily, definitely, surely. And then the subject becomes mansoob. The predicate stays marfu. Inna ar-rajula hakim. Inna Sulaymana shatirun. I had no part in making this example. Shatir is not always good, by the way. Kana Zaydun kabiran. Zayd was big. Kana was. Kabiran is a predicate, and here it is mansoob. Right? So because that kana came, the case changed. We'll talk about why it's not kabirun, but kabiran. Because of the kana. We could have just said, Zaydun kabirun. But that would mean Zayd is big. When I want to say Zayd was big, kana Zaydun kabiran. The function changes because it's a different sentence.
Will we go into more depth on was and is later on?
Yes. Everything here will be covered in more depth. So if it is new to you, then please do not be lost. Now, what if you want to just say, there is a man? In that case, it's called a predicate of existence. You just want to say a man exists, basically. In that case, what they usually do in Arabic is that they put the the predicate first. So they will say, for example, fil madinate rajulun. Here, rajulun, which comes at the end, is a subject. Fil Madina is the predicate. And that tells you the meaning is, in the city there is a man. It's not, there's no word here that says there is. There's no fil Madinate there is rajulun. But just that order tells you. If we had said rajulun fil Madina, it would have been a man in the city. So see how, in some cases, the order even in Arabic does have an effect. Right? So if I bring that fil Madina, if I leave it in the end, I will translate this, a man in the city. But if it comes in the front, in the city, a man is, or there is a man. In a city?
Yeah, in a city. Well, like, a man is in the city.
A man is in the city. That's what this says. A man is in the city. A man has no definite article. Al-Madina does have a definite article, is in the city. Or in Medina. But rajul is still the subject. If I add inna to this sentence, remember inna, I just told you don't remember probably, unless you've seen it before. The subject will become mansub. Rajulan is still the subject, so it will become rajulan. Again, don't worry about that detail, but just I'm giving you these examples, and they're in our lesson and in the textbook, so that you've seen different examples of how the i'rab can change. You are not expected to remember all of these things. And if you keep on forgetting that, for example, samawatin is right, but samawatan is wrong, or if you forget that Ibrahim can never be Ibrahime, don't worry about it. That's what the whole class is there to make fun of you for and to remind you for. That's what our job is. That's how we're going to get through 2 hours on Friday night. I will